everybody, and welcome to AI People. Today, we're talking to Pratik Verma, who is CEO at Okahu, which is an AI observability platform. Greetings, Pratik.
Hey, nice to meet you, Ben.
So we always kick things off by asking you to make some predictions about the AI industry as a whole. I know predictions in AI is always a fun game to play, so I think it's a good way to kick things off. So how do you see humans and AI collaborating with regard to work in 5 years' time and then in 15 years' time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if there's an optimist in me that says all the drudgery and then the hard work that people do for putting data in one file or trying to make checklists, all that will be done by AI, where you basically, instead of asking people to go do these smaller things, you basically ask an AI bot to say, hey, I'm onboarding a person on my team, what accesses should they have? And then AI would give you a checklist, and then you would start checking those things off. And in 15 years' time, hopefully everything works out really well, and AI can start doing most of those things, as opposed to telling us, hey, you should do this, and then waiting for us to actually do them. So that's an optimist world where a lot of the time that currently we spend doing kind of repetitive work that is not really adding a lot of value, and switching over to a lot of thoughtful, deep thinking work, which we will have more time for.
And do you think kind of the whole workforce is in a position to kind of do that kind of thoughtful, deep thinking type of work? Or, where does that leave people who are doing kind of mainly repetitive jobs at the moment?
But so this is kind of funny. I don't think there's a lot of people doing mainly repetitive work. So let's imagine somebody creating Excel spreadsheets. That's a classic work where somebody's trying to figure out what the checklists are that somebody needs to provide in terms of like the tasks people need to do. People will create those in Excel spreadsheets and then meticulously check things off, right? Now, what people are really doing there is not the creating of the checklist or putting things in a cell, which is kind of what ostensibly at the top level it looks like. What they're really doing underneath the cover is thinking about what should be there, and then actually verifying, who needs to know what needs to be done, right? And are the right things being done? So I think the work of are the right things being done isn't going to go away. And most people will have more time to do that. Like, imagine, people used to do this on a piece of paper. People used to write checklists on a piece of paper. Then Excel came around, and a lot of the, computing became really powerful for people. So the work of accounting didn't go away, right? It all just went from pen and paper into Excel spreadsheet. And I think the same thing will happen with AI. A lot of the drudgery will go away. The functional user screens we see today where people, click things will probably go away to the relevant pieces of information coming up on the screen at the right time, right? So now your work goes away from, hey, how much of my, 30, 40, 50% of my time is trying to create a dashboard. In future, it'll be that 40, 50% time thinking about why that number in the metric moved, higher or lower. So I think that will still be, yeah. And we do that today already. It's just the proportionality of what we do is lesser in the amount of time available for us to think.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of kind of AGI, obviously people have all kinds of different definitions. Where do you think we are in kind of relation to that at the moment? Is it still kind of a 20-year away thing, or is it something which is getting, tangibly close now?
Yeah, people smarter than me are debating about what AGI is. I don't understand it. From my standpoint, the way I think about it is there's a general camp of people saying there should be one super AI that basically can be a replacement for a human thinking process. I don't put a lot of stock in that. I put a lot of stock in the idea that, hey, if we're going to be really good and efficient with the use of AI, then what we want is really smart, small collections of domain-specific models that can do a task really well, because the kind of things that you need to do in order to be able to, successfully do things very quickly and efficiently, you need to develop those specific skills. Right? Even if you take a look at a human being, not all human beings are equivalently proficient at equivalently everything. That would be a waste of time.
Yeah.
Like
we've all got our specializations and domain expertise. Yeah.
Yeah, and physically, like, the people that can, dunk a basketball are going to be very different than the people that can be gymnasts. It's just because you bias towards those things. So, in my opinion, we're going to get a lot of collection of smart models that talk to each other. Now, collectively, do we start calling that, AGI, or they basically do the same function, or is there something else? I leave that up to kind of,
The
I mark that
philosophers.
as almost irrelevant in that discussion.
Yeah, no, sure. Okay. And then, if we think about AI's relationship to the global economy, like, do you see, if we look to a kind of a 15, 20-year horizon, do you think we're going to see more wealth inequality, or do you think it's going to narrow gaps in opportunity and kind of reduce that inequality?
Yeah. In my opinion, this is kind of our choice to make. On one simplistic way, people can assume, hey, let's, for coders, for example, if you just build more AI tools, you don't need as many coders. So there's going to be less work in it. But then you actually think thoughtfully through, okay, if there are no, the only reason why we're able to do that because there are senior software engineers. Well, if there are no junior software engineers working through the problems, how can there ever be senior software engineers? So what happens in the future, right? So I think this whole trajectory of simply saying AI is just going to replace everybody, I think it's too simplistic and is not likely to pan out. So whenever some new technology comes in, there is periodic impact to loss of existing jobs and livelihood, which means, the jobs you used to think about aren't going to be the same as you used to do before. But I think let's imagine if you have something more powerful at your disposal. Right? What else could you do? Spend your time doing? People aren't going to suddenly stop going to work. People aren't suddenly
Hmm.
stop going to eat food, right? People aren't suddenly stop going to, grow food. So I think all of those jobs will still be there. They'll just be done in different ways. Um, and anything that brings more efficiency and reduces the amount of effort somebody needs to do their foundational thing, it sets them up to be, accomplish a little bit more with their same amount of time. So my belief is um, the path to progress will be uncertain and hazy, but I don't think it's either, the world's gonna, collapse, or it's gonna be beautiful, altruistic. But I think there are opportunities for us to kind of automate a workflow. An example would be, hey, today we rely on a lot of irrigation. People used to have to think a lot about how to irrigate and how to do it very consistently. Now we can do that through robotics and, traditional AI, not the new LLMs and those kinds of things, but traditional AI. So that really sets us up to then grow different kinds of foods, and then we can spend our time thinking about, hey, what type of plants go together? How do we cycle those things better? So I think that will lead to a set of abundance. I mean, that's a very sort of esoteric example, but in my
Hmm.
opinion, that is one super striking thing that touches everyone's lives, food. So,
Food. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's my example that I use.
No, no, sure. Okay. And I think AI as an industry is very much like a soap opera. I think more so than other areas of technology, because big news coming out. There's so much hype. Just what is the kind of big news story that's caught your eye over the last couple of weeks?
The lot of the coming up of agents, and agents are going to do everything. There's a thought process among certain people that, hey, if we got really good at agents that can talk to each other and finish tasks, then maybe they can, order things for us. Maybe they can move money around. Maybe they can order products for us, and maybe they can kind of start doing shipping for us. So the people have sort of glommed onto that agentic view of the world as kind of the next evolution, where we no longer have to work about like doing a lot of software coding ourselves or doing a lot of tasks ourselves. Agentic workflows will take care of that for us. And then there's been some advances from Anthropic around, hey, how do agents talk to each other? That's super interesting. And then OpenAI's investment in Swarmed framework is super interesting. So those are kind of the new things that I'm super excited about.
I take it you saw the kind of viral video that went around of the laptop and the phone talking to each other.
Oh yeah,
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 and they kind of switched to code when they
yeah.
realized that they were both agents, and yeah, that was kind of interesting. Sort of peep into the future. Um, So
I wonder how much of that is contrived versus reality. I almost wondered about that oftentimes.
no, I think definitely, especially when they go kind of really viral like this, you wonder, you know, and I think like the robot videos that we've had in the past and, doing
Yeah.
dancing and things like that, I think it's
Yeah.
as much PR as much as anything else. But anyway. So before we jump into Okahu, I just wondered if you could just kick things off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background. Kind of interested in your journey from PhD in chemistry to kind of building a startup and then being acquired by Microsoft and then kind of now in the AI industry. Just give us the kind of helicopter view of that story.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of funny. When I went to grad school, I moved out to California from the Midwest so that I could go to grad school in chemistry. And I spent, 6, 7 years in a lab toiling away, trying to basically make fun of, basically figure out how we could make and learn about chemistry from horseshoe crab, why it is blue. I never thought I'd be building a software company, but what I really wanted to do was take the software for computational chemistry that I had built for my research and figure out how we can help assimilate that in companies like Eli Lilly and other pharmaceutical companies. So when I got there, it turned out that they didn't really want that part of the information. They wanted the data management part of what we were building. And it
Okay.
turns out that my father had started a company before where he was, building some of these technologies. And so I got to learn about this space a lot from him. And then we ended up sort of taking that, and I ended up joining a accelerator for Stanford community, which is called StartX. And I got to learn about, what it is like to be a founder, and really sort of got my bearing on that. And at the end of that demo day is kind of I realized, okay, hey, like this is actually something which could be a business. And then
Hmm.
fast forward, 7 years, we started from, hey, we're going to do database aggregation to then doing data security for old databases. Then Hadoop became a big thing, so we ended up doing that. And over the years, I learned that you have to start iterating on new problems each kind of week, month, year. And the trajectory of the company that was going to be a computational chemistry company ended up being a database security company for Hadoop and cloud databases in 6 years. And then it turned out we were partnering with folks like Microsoft, Dell EMC, and it turns out that Microsoft was also building what we were building at the same time. So we kind
Okay.
of ended up being fellow travelers. And they said, hey, why don't you come, do this at Microsoft? And so that's worked out really well for us because they were one of our biggest partner to begin with.
Hmm.
So it was kind of a ready source of customers for us. And so that then I ended up kind of spending 3 years learning what it's like to be in the hyperscaler kind of world.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating because I had never seen things like that before, the way they operate, the methodical way business planning happens. And so I learned those tricks. And then I said, okay, after 3 years, I got to go do my own thing, take a couple years off, and ended up realizing that, hey, this AI thing has something to do with it. And I spent sort of 3 years working with the AI, 3 months working with the AI fund to sort of try to figure out, hey, what business can there be, trying to learn about the problem spaces. And eventually my friend, Prasad, my co-founder, he was ready to leave Microsoft. And so we said, okay, let's go do something. And then, we jumped in and we ended up finding, the problem that we're solving with Okahu, which is observability.
Yeah. Okay. So do you want to kind of kick things off from there then by just, introducing kind of the platform and what it does?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, the premise here is today AI developers are building applications and then adding AI capability, automation capability into their existing experiences their customers and employees are using, right? So, for example, if you're a marketing company, you're probably on Instagram. And there are a lot of automated experiences that can enhance the user's experience of what content they see, or customer support. People are trying to get those through channels like WhatsApp and Instagram. So that's kind of one of those socials. So as an AI developer, you're saying, hey, how can I use AI to add more capability to be more responsive to our people, our customers inside of the existing channels, right? So that's kind of how they build. So what we found is people are building those AI, or another example would be employees. A lot of people, we're talking on Teams, on the Teams channel, a lot of people have these AI bot and assistants. Historically, these AI bots and assistants could, do simple tasks that were already there in a rules-based fashion. Now they can be a little bit more flexible. So there's these class of automated experiences that these developers and enterprise companies are building. And it turns out that a lot of those applications are built using 3 or 4 different frameworks. They are built using lots of different sort of models. They're running on different places. So as people try to build them from lab into production, they run into a problem saying, hey, I don't know where it's going wrong. So that's where we realized that if we figure out a way to hook our agents inside of these applications, then we can very quickly tell you, hey, you've got 5 pieces of code, workflows automation using 2 or 3 different models. When the user is asking for these kind of classes of questions, your LLM fails in this particular fashion. So all of that observability is provided to you in a simple way, so you don't have to go through all of the drudgery, if you will, of collecting telemetry data, stitching it together, and then converting it into insights. So we give that to you as a product.
And then how do you give that kind of unified view across the different AI components? Is that kind of custom integrations for like each different kind of product that they're working with, or like how does the tool work?
Yeah, absolutely. So our vision of the world is if you're a developer, you can use any framework you want to write any AI you want. Today, you would have to write, without Okahu, you would have to write lots and lots of, there's 2 problems. It's difficult to instrument your code because you have to write code lines to say, hey, I need to instrument this. I need to send the logs out in this specific way, in this specific format, so you can analyze it. And then the second part of the problem today they have to solve is when they get the logs, how do I stitch those logs together? So people use different kinds of tooling for that. So the way Okahu works is we replace your individual many lines of code with a drop-in package for Python or for TypeScript. And what it does is it eliminates the need for you to type individual declarations of code. And whenever you write your code, because we've gone through and built all the connectors out of the box in the open source, you don't have to write those pieces of code. You just drop our package in, and then the logs are automatically created in the right format, and they're built into a format called OpenTelemetry, so you can put into your existing observability pipeline if you so choose, or they can be sent to what we call Okahu Cloud or Okahu in your cloud, where basically our pieces of software already knows what the format is, and there are queries in there that basically convert that into relevant insights. So the interesting part here is, hey, we already have built in out of the box reports or metrics that say, if you're building AI, these are the kind of things you should look for, and these are the things that are KPI that tell you something is going good or something is going bad. Because we've already built that, you don't have to build it in your existing observability platform tools like Datadog or Grafana or Arise or any one of those.
Yeah, okay. And it also offers like real-time recommendations, is that right?
Yes, that's something we're building. So an example is today you get 5 different errors. So an example, a common error that you'll get is you'll run out of credits in your OpenAI, right? And lots and lots of those queries will all stack up as saying, oh, these are all failed. So our recommendation would be adjust the sort of credit token, and it's coming because your budget allocation or max token allocation is off as a setting. So those are the kind of examples we will educate you on.
And also, like one of the things that kind of you've designed Okahu with is kind of aligning observability with specific team goals. So how do you tailor recommendations to different teams like financial department or DevOps? How does that work?
Yeah. So the way we think about the world, there's 3 groups of people that are involved into this equation. So there are the people who are AI app developers. They may be citizen developers or kind of more sophisticated developers that are writing the code and tweaking it. So the main task is, hey, how do I basically figure out which prompt, the things that I write, are the appropriate ones and the functions are appropriate ones. So their main change is, how do I change the code, right? But that's not the only group of people that are involved. Once they push the thing into production, the people that are really managing it and operating it once the code has been developed and deployed in enterprise companies are the platform engineers. So these are the folks that are saying, hey, I got to go. Lots of different application development teams are giving me I'm running the applications for them. So I maintain a common Kubernetes. People put those pods into place. I need to monitor it. So they're concerned about more different things. They're concerned about more about, hey, how did the latency happen with resource allocation? Do I need to give more resources or less resources, right? Those are two different things of concerns to two different people. But the net effect is the end user is going to see it as slow, whether if it is because of slow prompt or because of underutilization of resources. So our software basically says, hey, if you are worried about performance and latency, if you're a platform engineer, we'll give you all the ops related, resource related recommendations. If you are an app developer, we'll focus in on more quality of prompts. And both of those are served by the common platform because it's a common problem. And the thing that you're tweaking is a common thing, which can impact each other. So that's a sort of a trivial example of what you can imagine. Now, carry that forward, you have these people in a product engineering team where IT leaders are looking at these systems and they're saying, hey, I've got 5 or 6 different apps. I've committed to a SLO with my sort of stakeholders. How do I know which applications are meeting SLO, right? Availability SLOs or adoption SLOs or engagement SLOs, and how many of them are within cost profile of my LLM workloads or my Kubernetes cost for cloud cost. How do I kind of manage that? So then basically we have the same data internally, we're just putting different lens on top of it. So those will be the things that will be upcoming. So our view of the world is there are different people involved in making AI be so successful for the end users of the company. And our job is to say, how easy can we make it for them to find the right answer to say, hey, is my application or is the user getting what they want? Yes or no? And if not, what do I change? Do I change the resources? Do I change the code? And depending on what I change, what happens to my cost budget or what happens to my performance overall, because there's lots of complicated things going on. So we should make that very simple.
And how does it kind of make that kind of prediction, if you like, as in if we change one variable, this is going to be the impact. So what's the prediction based on what data?
Yeah, so it's all based on telemetry. So everything is based on how your application is running at this moment. So we took a very specific, there's a lot of thinking that's gone on in this kind of space of code analytics, dynamic tracing over the past, 10, 15 years. And basically the thing that we've come up to is there's no substitute for watching how an application is doing at the time it's running. The problem then becomes, how do I tie it back to something that is within my control? Pieces of code I can change, line of code that I can change. And all of the kind of alerting and every sort of pipeline analytics that people have built in observability sort of stacks over the years is designed at making that kind of decision, the tying the issue to the cause, kind of making that step easier. It's still not easier because the approach people are using is, hey, let's collect any and all data, telemetry data that you can. The more data we have, the more insights we're going to get. So it turns out over the next past 5-10 years, the data management for telemetry has exploded, but the ROI of impact to business because of found, avoided issues remains the same. And the root cause when we found out, treating it was people were collecting more data than they could manage. And so they were making choices about what telemetry data to keep or not keep, which means their analytics were mostly on data on a very small fraction of data that was usable at any given point in time. And bulk of their data was kind of wasteful. So that all that extra data wasn't giving them any more insight. So our approach is, hey, there are only 4 or 5 things that are within your control in the AI stack, right? Prompts, what resources you give it, what model you give it. Those are 2 or 3 decision points. If we can basically just use only the specific telemetry data of your application as it's running in the appropriate framework and make the jump about, hey, what should an API do? We can make a lot of those recommendations with a small amount of data. That means you get very specific insights. And we're actually only collecting the data that answers those questions in the time. So it helps you basically answer your question much better. Yeah. So it's a slightly different approach than what other people have taken.
And when you're going and talking to customers who perhaps don't have anything in place at the moment for kind of AI observability, like what do you see as being the biggest gaps in the tools that they're using at the moment? Like where does Okahu have the kind of fastest impact, if you like?
Yeah, so most people, the ones we talk to are mostly in the cloud. So they're Azure customer, they're an Amazon customer, they're a Google customer, right? So their first instinct is, hey, let me go into Azure Monitor because Azure has all these tools, right? So as soon as they go into Azure Monitor, they find out that, oh, I get some amount of information my application is running. I'm going to see what the CPU or GPU utilization is, but I don't know which model inference made that call, right? So that's where they run into problems. So then they go and figure out how to get the logs out. And they'll basically, next they'll go to something like a Datadog to say, hey, I already use that for all of my other infrastructure monitoring. So I'll dump the AI logs in there as well. But then the problem they run into is they have to then figure out how to stitch things together. So we basically come in on those point and we say, hey, this is a tool. Take this free open source library that makes your instrumentation easy to figure out how to get the right telemetry from your application into Azure Blob or S3. And then, if you want to go do the analytics on top of it yourself, go ahead and do it. That would be super helpful. But it turns out that most people say, oh, that's really difficult. So at that point, they say, tell me what query are coming in that are relevant for you. Another example is a banking industry, customers of ours who are basically saying, hey, we want to create these chat that basically automates some of the customer management L1 type of support issues for our internal teams on behalf of our customers. So they want to create something like an Erica type of a chat and going to work on that. And it turns out that they don't know how to evaluate, what they don't know. Right. So we've created some queries already that says, hey, you should really be looking at jailbreaks, people trying to attempt to break into your system. Those are pretty common kind of scenarios for the financial chats. So those are the things that we're providing them. And then the question is, how do you actually make those metrics trustworthy? There's a lot of engineering that goes into it, so you don't have to customize it. So people try to customize it. We basically say, we've tested these already with other people, so you can try using these and they'll be helpful in your ways.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the reason why people come in.
And as kind of generative AI scales and different models come with different strengths and weaknesses, like how do you see the observability landscape kind of evolving over the next 3 or 5 years? Like where does Okahu kind of fit into that landscape?
Yeah, that is super exciting because this is, the choice points that I was talking about earlier as a developer, what choice points you have. It used to be that most people will say, oh, I got to go to Bedrock with Anthropic, or I got to go to, OpenAI. Those were my sort of dead obvious choices. As time goes on, we're going to have a plethora of choices. And whenever you have plethora of choices, then you want to not be stuck into decision paralysis, right? You can go back directly to data. So where we see Okahu being is, as people start using more and more models, if they start with, let's say, OpenAI, start with, Gemini, they can start seeing how it operates in real life. They can do A/B testing with multiple models, and through observability data, they can say, hey, I think these kinds of cases were evolved with higher quality, lower impact to performance in this particular situation, but this particular model is better suited for different use cases. So all of those observability data sets, we should be able to tell you and answer those questions. Or to say, hey, this thing is costing me too much. I want to reduce the token size and use a smaller model to address the same thing. Do I have a regression in quality of my application, yes or no? So all of those things will become really, part and parcel of people choosing and building their application using whatever building blocks, they want. So the more choices they'll have there, the easier our choice to help them, easier it'll be for them to utilize observability rather than, sit in decision paralysis about, hey, what model we choose.
And are you focusing just purely on kind of systems performance, or is there like a governance or kind of data privacy or ethics kind of play with this as well?
So our most there's only two things that we really sort of, from a broadly speaking, sort of care about. As a user who's using some product which is being powered by automated AI, right? We're kind of putting ourselves in the minds of that person and answering the question of, hey, what do you want your AI to do? Hey, it should give me the things that I asked it for without frustration, right? So it should know what I understand. It should give me things that are correct, right? And it should give me things in the correct order quickly without me wasting a lot of time. So those are the three things we really are going to help our sort of AI developers get insights on about what their users expect. And, hallucination is, part of kind of the tricky area for a lot of people, because it's a biased response to hallucination. Some people will say yes, some people will say no. And so that's an area of research for us to figure out, like, how do we address things more interesting ways there. Our current bar is to say, hey, if the user didn't get what they asked for, right? Or if they got an answer that wasn't present in your knowledge base, then it's probably not true. So we'll flag it for you. But that's an area that we'll sort of spend a lot of time into. Data privacy and governance, I've done that in our previous life. The product we ended up implementing at Microsoft was called Azure Purview, and it was basically a data governance product, which dealt with scanning the data at scale and then flagging where sensitive data applies. I think there's a room for that, something like that here, where you can say, oh, certain conversations had sensitive information. So you can sort of label those as being highly sensitive or less sensitive. But those are kind of much more in the future kind of a view for us.
And in terms of kind of, again, looking into the future and, as the kind of product evolves, like, is there an opportunity for kind of the system to become self-healing? So at the moment, I guess you make recommendations and then the company can kind of either act on that or they don't. Whereas, would there be a future where it would kind of just automatically pick up these issues and resolve them in real time?
Yeah, that's a very astute observation. So I was pitching this Okahu at the time to an investor about a year and a half ago, and I was telling them about kind of, hey, look, people are going to build this application. Some things, we're going to get all this telemetry, and we're going to give them all the recommendation. And then he stopped me there. He's like, hey, Pratik, we're invested in companies, or our vision for the future is everything is autonomous. If a human being can make decisions and make choices of recommendation based on the action and recommendation based on the telemetry data, we envision a world where everything is autonomous. I thought a little bit about it. I kind of shrugged it off in the moment, but the more I thought about it later, the more sort of excited I got about, hey, the problem today is, can we get enough telemetry data to then make simple recommendations, right? And let's imagine we got really good at making recommendations, identifying the right set of recommendations and making recommendations that people implement. We'll then see how those recommendations pan out in the next iteration of the telemetry, right? So as more and more data gets used, there are going to be enough spans of types of recommendations, enough spans of types of problems we will see that over time we can do this like iterative feedback loop. And wouldn't it be great if we can basically put some autonomous sort of system in place which says, hey, these kinds of recommendations are high fidelity, mostly take care of this on an automated way, right? How far is it in the future? I don't know, but that's a super exciting, astute observation that you had, that people also smarter than me kind of made me realize could be possible.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll keep our eyes peeled for that one in the coming years then. So with the platform as it stands at the moment, is it just focusing on kind of language models, or is there kind of a multimodal kind of AI models that it can observe?
Yeah, so the focus right now is only on application code that uses textual model, because even in multimodal thing, the interesting part that typically fails is the part that says, what is a user instruction and how do I analyze a user instruction in natural language, right? So we're really mostly concerned about the fidelity of the output based on analyzing what the user put in, but really on the task that the software application took, because typically it's not only one thing, right? Even if you take a simple voice call, right? There's a voice to text translation, and there's some action upon that text, and then there's a bunch of workflow that kicks off. So in a typical application, there are 5 or 6 or 7 different models. There's a lookup to a database. So the problems really are figuring out, which of those steps is an issue. And all of that today operates on text and code. And so that's kind of been our kind of focus area.
Yeah, okay. And then if we just kind of finish things off, kind of exploring your experience around company building, I'm kind of interested where you've kind of built one company and are now doing it again in the kind of age of AI. I wondered how you feel AI is changing the process of building a company and your role as a leader. So like, do you see AI tools evolving your decision making, as kind of different data comes into your purview?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. The first time I started the company, since not being a developer myself, I had this like nagging sort of I guess a self-confidence issue in the earlier days where I was thinking about, hey, I don't know how to code, right? So like, how would I judge whether something is interesting or not? I learned over the years that understanding people is more important about company building than anything else, and you have to actually like working with the people that you work with. And magic happens when people are able to interact with each other in a creative way and basically kind of bounce ideas off of each other rather than having a wall of communication that says, these are the tasks I want you to do, and you'll do these tasks, and they'll say, oh, these tasks can be done in this time frame, right? That's a very weird way in my mind at this moment to run a company. What's interesting about this is having AI tools and automated code gen tools have given me more appreciation for what people do, and I understand um, how people write software um, better now because it's become more accessible. So the kind of conversations that I have with my co-founder is very technical, are about, hey, how can we do things faster or better, or how can we assess how far we are by using some AI tools? And he's able to explain that easier to me, and I'm able to grok it a little bit easier. So it allows, opportunities for us to do things in a way that I wouldn't have thought about in the previous company. Right. So this is the kind of stuff that builds trust among people working on a company. So I think that's what's different. Like I felt really viscerally because the other day somebody showed me one of my coworkers was just showing me how to create a Teams bot, and then he had cursor window open on the right hand side. There was a problem that he was looking at, and he basically typed in English, hey, how do I turn off this setting? And instead of him going through all the documentation, it sort of popped it up for him. So imagine like now a lot of things that we used to wait for in previous company about, hey, somebody's got to go debug this issue and it's going to take them a long time. Some of these things are much more accessible. So now, since that it's more accessible, the kind of conversations we have about, oh, what we should be doing are very different. And it makes building a new company a little bit more fun, if you will.
And AI as an industry is kind of full of hype cycles. When you're growing a company and thinking about different features in the product, different models that come out, and whether you should be using those or not. Like, how do you decide between what is going to be the next really transformative thing and what is noise and you need to ignore?
Yeah, it's going to sound a little frou-frou, but I follow the advice of Rick Rubin, the record producer. He says your task is to build, and it's the audience task to sort of judge whether they like it or not, and they can like it in the same way that you intended it or not. So that's a very glib way of me saying we think through, okay, from a thought experiment, if somebody needed to know where the application is going wrong, what are the possibilities? And we start from first principles and we say, okay, here's kind of what needs to be done. And then we say, what do we have the ability to build? And we sort of marry the two together and we kind of construct it. Our goal is to create a lot more things that are possible than they were possible before. But we don't put a lot of stock in kind of being, prejudging, which feature is going to be super more important. We let the individual app developers sort of tell us what that is. So we've gotten really good, interesting feedback where we thought some feature was going to be super powerful about having the tool. And like an example would be having the ability to see in your own IDE where the traces are. And the feedback we got was, hey, that's interesting, but can you just give me this so I can share with somebody else? And that's super interesting. So two of us can be looking at the same data.
And the
That was a light bulb
collaboration
moment.
element, yeah.
Yeah. And so the light bulb moment was, hey, our job is to sort of do three things: capture telemetry that wasn't possible before, create analysis and metrics that weren't possible before because you didn't have the data, but do it very quickly without an effort. And then the third one is cover as many frameworks as possible. So if somebody was doing a tool, they wouldn't run into a problem that says, oh, I can't use your software because it doesn't cover this sort of new framework that came in, tomorrow or yesterday, right? So those are the three aspects. As long as we keep building that, the cycles are going to go up and down, but overall, we're going to go into like a normal trajectory.
I think we're heading in the right area. Yeah, I mean, that last point you mentioned kind of feeds in a bit to this next point, because I read a term which I'd never come across this week, and I was interested to see what you thought of it, because it was talking about ecosystem fit as opposed to product market fit.
Yeah.
So I was interested whether builders now are kind of thinking about like that ecosystem, the collaborations, partnership, almost before or even in parallel with product market fit.
Yeah, I think that is definitely a newer trend. I think it was already emerging with the beginning of cloud. We saw three main hyperscalers, sort of win out in those things for majority of the market, like Azure, Amazon, Google. So I think the remnants of that was already there in 5-6 years ago. But I think you're right. The more I guess I reflect on it, everyone is talking about, hey, we're in the Gemini ecosystem, or we're in the Azure ecosystem, OpenAI ecosystem. And then certain choice points that you have to make. There are some efficient and obvious choices that people can make. And so I think the ecosystem play is definitely super important. And the thing I've understood thing that I have realized over the past year and a half is the world's going to look very much like foundational capabilities are going to be provided by big anchors in the ecosystem. So foundational models by OpenAI, models by Gemini, and ways to run those by sort of major cloud providers. Core, we've bought weights and biases recently. So people are trying to build those features and capabilities up above. So those are going to be anchors for us. But then there's interesting connections you can draw on top. Hey, I want to be able to do monitoring, but I want to do it equivalently in any way I want. Because some of the combinations that developers want are through, OpenAI and Azure, but a lot of their application workload can be on Amazon as well. So there are things where they need to extend that workload to AWS as well. So those are kind of scenarios where opting into, parts of an ecosystem that you can traverse across is going to be super interesting. Lots of companies are going to be sort of thinking and building about there. And that helps, that also kind of helps think about how do we make the overall sort of AI ecosystem work well together, because no one part of it is super deterministic. At any given point in time, if you told me, hey, DeepSeek was gonna get really good adoption very quickly when they did very little training, very sort of inexpensive training compared to what OpenAI had done, I would probably sort of consider it kind of a fantasy. But in the world where something like that exists, you cannot rely on a sort of a single product market fit approach. You have to think about what you're doing. Is it going to be durable across 5-10 years when big players make tectonic movements or shapes? And that's all basically an ecosystem play.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's been great having you on today. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach you? Where do you spend most of your time? Where do you live?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in the Bay Area. Come have a chat with me. I love coffee. Also, the best way to reach me is either on LinkedIn or directly at my email, Pratik at okahu.ai. Pratik at okahu.ai.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you for your time, Pratik, and thank you to everybody watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of AI People coming soon.